Hello, welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. As you know, I'm Big Italy 42, and he is Scott Mailwood at Sports 25 to Life, and we're talking about all the pitchers on tonight's slate on DraftKings and FanDuel, and there's actually a lot of great options tonight for a Monday. Obviously, you know the top names, no surprise there, but these middling options and even aces that are in tougher matchups. So really a lot of guys that are in play today. So we're probably not even going to get to the very bottom of these guys because you already know the guys you're going to pick on. But we'll give you the breakdown for these top guys and the middle guys and who you're going to want in cash games, who you should get some exposure to in GPPs, and it's going to be a fun night.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of good pitching options tonight.
All right, we'll start here at the top with Felix Hernandez, $12,000 on FanDuel, $11,600 on DraftKings, and he's facing the Yankees at Safeco Field. Obviously, you gotta love that. Lowest total of the night by far, 6-run total. He's a -140 favorite, opposed by Michael Pineda. And, I mean, this has really just got to be your top option for cash games. You got a 26.6% strikeout rate, 62.1% ground ball rate, xFIP of 2.65, a walk rate of 5.6. Everything going for Felix Hernandez. I mean, he's arguably the best pitcher in the game right now, depending on who you ask. And it's really hard to look away from him tonight with in cash games, especially with Clayton Kershaw being in Coors Field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really not even that close for me. I think Felix is the way to go. I know Kershaw's been looking really good over his last two starts here, but just the fact that he's at Coors, the Rockies' offense has picked it up a little bit over the last week or so here. I just feel a lot safer about Felix, especially in Seattle. The Yankees' offense has not been great outside of Yankee Stadium. They've got all those lefties that really love playing in Yankee Stadium, and frankly, they've built their team in a really good way to play so many games at Yankee Stadium. But when you're playing at a huge ballpark in Seattle, the Yankees have a ton of home run guys from top to bottom in their lineup. I mean, they start out with Ellsbury's banged up right now, but with Gardner and Ellsbury at the top, after that, everyone's a home run hitter. Yep. And that's not the way you want to have your team built at Seattle. And I think Felix is just in a great spot tonight to be the top option.
Yeah, I'm with you there. He'll be in all my cash games. And, I mean, even when you look at his splits against lefties and righties, he's been damn good against both. I mean, against lefties, allowing a 249 WOBA over 35 innings with 30 strikeouts and 8 walks. And over here against righties, 258 WOBA allowed in 35.2 innings, 41 strikeouts, 7 walks. So, I mean, neither lefties or righties are touching this guy this year. He's just so good. I'm with you. Not overthinking this one. It's Felix Hernandez as your cash game option. Obviously, FanDuel and on DraftKings, you're going to need a second option, but you can pick him out from these other guys we get to here.
Yeah, I mean, the guy I like probably the second most, if we're talking cash games, is DeGrom.
Yep.
At San Diego today, 9,700 is a decent price. Really nice discount for Felix Hernandez and Kershaw on DraftKings as your second pitcher. It's a big slate, so there's a lot of value options at hitter. You could go Felix and DeGrom in this one if you wanted to. Obviously, it's not going to leave you with a ton of power in your bats, but as far as having really solid pitching, that's probably the two guys I would go in cash games price-wise. It would be really hard to go Kershaw or Hernandez, and I just don't really want to pitch Kershaw at Coors. I'm just not really excited about it for 10-7, even though you did get a bit of a discount for pitching there. But DeGrom I like quite a bit against San Diego. Their offense is a little banged up right now too. Obviously in Petco, which has been a little bit more of a hitter's park lately, but I mean, I think that's going to come back to normal a little bit. A lot of what is different about the home run rate and stuff there is that the Padres offense is just better this year than it's ever been.
Much better.
I mean, their offense the last few years has been, I mean, they've had really no big power hitters there anyway. So the fact that they added Kemp, even Myers, Upton, guys like that, it's just going to naturally increase the home run rate at the park. But for opposing teams, it's still a pitcher's park, and I feel pretty good about it. The only thing I don't like about DeGrom is that he's not favored today, which makes it a little bit tough. Cashner's a favorite in that one, and I mean, the Mets offense has been struggling a bit, but I don't know. I don't feel too strongly about it. It's obviously basically a pick-em as far as the line goes.
Yeah, and I'm in complete agreement with you here on DeGrom being my second cash game option. Excuse me. The Padres righty dominant, obviously, especially with Will Myers out. DeGrom, by far the best WOBA splits against righties of any pitcher on the board tonight, and that's saying a lot considering some of these other big names. 207 WOBA allowed to righties so far this year, so No concerns at all. And if there is such thing as a park downgrade, I should say, for hitters from Citi Field, it's definitely going to be in San Diego at Petco. So Jacob deGrom, gotta love him tonight in this spot. And I'm with you. He should be in line for a really, really nice night. I think that pairing right there gives you an awesome floor in your DraftKings games.
Yep, absolutely.
We'll go ahead and talk about Kershaw now. We mentioned him briefly. He's $11,800, just $200 less than King Felix on FanDuel, and he's $900 less on DraftKings, so a little bit of a discount there. I mean, it's not even close for me on FanDuel at that close price. Consider it a little bit for if you're deciding for tournaments, I'd say, on DraftKings. I still don't think I'll play Kershaw in cash, but, I mean, he hasn't been himself at times this year, but he's still got a 31% strikeout rate, a 51% ground ball rate, 2.11 xFIP. The guy's still having a hell of a season. His WOBA splits aren't great so far this season, but some of those are inflated. I mean, his ERA really inflated as well because how many runs has the bullpen allowed after he's been pulled? I believe it's 5 so far this season. So I mean, it's been just ridiculous, and I mean, it's some tough luck from him. I get it, but it just doesn't make any sense to target him in Coors tonight in cash. But I think he's an awesome GPP target because a lot of people probably be scared off him. And yes, he did struggle in his last game at Coors, but in that game in Coors, though, if you watch that game, he was dominant for the first, I believe it was 5 innings, and then had one bad inning, and that was the end of it. It wasn't like he got hit around.
No, definitely not. And I mean, despite all of the weird stuff that's happened to him this year, he's looked great. Like, he's still doing everything he was doing, and he's really come around over the last couple of games with just the luck stats, really, and that's all it's been. I mean, obviously, there's a greater chance of home runs. Everyone hits a little bit better in Coors. He's still probably the best tournament play on the board. I mean, he could easily throw a shutout at Coors. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. I mean, he's done it before, so I mean, he's certainly playing. That 25% strikeout rate against lefties for the Rockies certainly intriguing, and that's the worst in the league. So you got
and they do have a lot of lefties in their lineup that they play against lefties too. I mean, every once in a while they sit like Dickerson or someone like that for Drew Stubbs or something, but I mean, they're just not a strong hitting team overall right now. I mean, outside of Coors especially, even in Coors they haven't been great. But especially against lefties, they struggle. I think Kershaw is probably the top GPP play of the night with how heavily owned I feel like Felix is going to be. And honestly, I think deGrom is going to be a decent bit up there in ownership percentage as well.
Yeah, and I hope that they end up bringing someone like Drew Stubbs in the lineup instead of Dickerson, because that's just going to make it even easier for Clayton Kershaw. That's a couple guaranteed strikeouts. But either way, as we look at other pitchers, Gerrit Cole, $10,100 on FanDuel. And he's $9,900 on DraftKings. And you don't love the spot for him against the San Francisco offense that's really been heating up against right-handed pitching. But Cole's got elite stuff. I mean, he's got a home run rate of just 0.56 on the year. Second highest strikeout rate of anyone on the board tonight, 27.5%. Great ground ball rate at 53%. I mean, the only thing not going in his favor is that he's facing a hot offense. But, I mean, outside of that, I actually love Gerrit Cole in tournaments tonight because individually there's not a lot of bats outside of Buster Posey you really worry about with the Giants. But as a team, they've been hitting the ball pretty well. But Gerrit Cole has just as high of a ceiling as just about anyone today.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he's looked pretty good lately, too. And, I mean, the strikeout rate is the big thing with him. He's another solid GPP play. The price on DraftKings is going to keep me away a little bit. I prefer him on FanDuel, I would say, just because he's going to be a really low-owned guy because there's only one pitcher there, and the price scares you a little bit less due to that fact. I mean, it's just tough to throw a really good pitcher out there with Cole at 9,900 on DraftKings is the tough part. But in GPPs, I mean, it's easier to go with weaker hitters as far as, price-wise. And like we mentioned, there's a bunch out there that we're going to go over on the DraftKings pod. That we'll be able to pick there. So, I mean, I think going two really strong pitchers today is a solid option in GPPs if you can get the lineup to work around them.
Yeah, it's not often that you get this many good pitching options, and there's going to be plenty of people going that route, and I think that I'm with you, and that's the route you're going to want to take tonight. Get yourself that nice high floor. Target yourself some cheaper batters, and there are some today that we'll get into in the other podcasts. But outside of that, next up, Michael Pineda, $9,700 on FanDuel, $8,800 on DraftKings. I don't like targeting pitchers that are opposing Felix Hernandez. Obviously, it worked out pretty well for Chris Archer last time, but I'm just not a big fan. Yeah, he'll be a decent tournament option. I prefer him on DraftKings because he's almost $1,000 cheaper than he is on FanDuel. But he's had some really bad outings. He had a really awesome one against Baltimore with 16 Ks in 7 innings. Then negative points against KC, struggled against Texas, then got his revenge on KC last time out. But it's a Seattle offense that still isn't hitting the ball particularly well. I mean, Robinson Cano got a home run finally after about a month. But I'm not a big believer in the bats, but I'm also not a believer in a high floor for Michael Pineda tonight. Because if we go back to what Seattle was doing at home last year, they mashed righties at home. And if they finally start to get it going, Seager's starting to hit the ball. Like we said, Cano, maybe he's got a little bit of confidence. I'm just not a big fan. I think that there's better options tonight.
Yeah, I mean, especially because he's facing Felix is the big thing. I mean, it's not going to be an easy win to come by whatsoever. I mean, he doesn't have the win to fall back on, which is one of the things I always like to have in my back pocket when I'm paying that much for a pitcher. Like you said, he has a ton of upside. The one good thing he does have going for him is since he pitched for Seattle for the early part of his career, most of these guys haven't seen him more than 4 or 8 times. So that helps him out a decent amount. So I'm okay with looking at him in GPPs, but without I'm assuming he's not getting the win, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Archer had, 8 innings and 12 Ks, and he didn't even get a single run of support.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not feeling great about that as far as that goes. I do think there's a decent amount of strikeout upside. He's thrown 7+ innings in 4 of his last 6 starts, it looks like here. So, I mean, the upside with innings and strikeouts is there. I just think he could throw a great game and still lose 2-1 or something like that really easily in this one.
Yeah, and especially at almost $10,000 on FanDuel. I mean, you don't want to be paying that kind of price for a guy who is really unlikely to get those 4 points for the win. So, next up, this is going to be interesting. GPP option, Garrett Richards, $8,800 on FanDuel and $9,500 on DraftKings. And he's facing a Tampa Bay team. He's -150 favorite and a 7-run total in LA. So obviously you got a pitcher's park there. And you look at what Tampa Bay has been doing, or I should say not been doing against right-handed pitching. 300 team WOBA, 22nd in the league, 21.2% strikeout rate. They don't have much power, 127 team ISO. And we've seen good from Richards this year, and we've seen bad from him. But when he's on, I mean, he's got big-time upside. His strikeout rate on the season, just under 20%, but ground ball rate of almost 56%. You got to love that. You don't like the walk rate, though, at almost 10%. So there's some lows and there's some highs here. I think he's going to be, I won't say popular, but I think we'll see quite a bit of Garrett Richards in tournaments. But I just think that this is another one of those situations where I think he's fine for a win and everything, but I'd much rather pay a little bit more for guys like Jacob deGrom and Gerrit Cole.
Yeah, I mean, the strikeouts haven't really been there is the tough thing, which has limited his upside a bit. He had that 110 strikeout game against Houston, who strikes out, it feels like, 10 times every game.
Yeah. And he had 1 against Boston.
Yeah, right. Outside of that game, I mean, he's had over 5, I think, 1 time. And that's just not really what you're looking for when you're paying up for a guy like this. He's looked pretty good, and the Angels' offense has come around a little bit. Obviously, the matchup's not bad here either against Tampa Bay, who, I mean, they're not scaring anybody. Unless Longoria has a big game, they're not putting a lot of runs on the board. And he's facing an opposing pitcher in Alex Colomé, who hasn't been very good lately. So it feels like it's a pretty solid win. But the problem is it feels more like a cash game play. And for 200 more on DraftKings and only a couple hundred more on FanDuel, I'm probably going to DeGrom in cash games there. So it just doesn't seem like he has a lot of places to fit into lineups today. Yeah,
I'm with you there. And as we look at the next option here, and it's an interesting one. Jason Hamels, I actually really like him in tournaments. He's $8,800 on FanDuel, and even cheaper, $7,800 on DraftKings. You look at his matchup here, and it's a fine one. I lost his odds here. Oh, he's -125 favorite at Miami. Wind blowing in slightly. It says 7 to 12 miles an hour right now. And this is a Miami team that has been awful against right-handed pitching. 27th in the league with a 291 team WOBA. Lowest team ISO at 103, striking out almost 21% of the time. And he's been one of those guys that has been really good all season, but no one ever plays him. No one ever talks about him. 7, 7, 8, 7, 6, and 8 innings pitched in his last 6 starts. If we're talking FanDuel points, 19, 7, 17, 13, 15, 12. And those last 3, 12, 15, and 13, didn't get a win in any of those. So, I mean...
No, I mean... 3 out of the last 4 games with 8+ strikeouts. It seems like the Cubs find one of these guys every year now that they just kind of pull out of nowhere, make a small tweak to what he's doing, and he just gets the job done every time out. like you were saying, no one's been playing him, and he's been. I mean, I'll talk DraftKings points since you were just talking FanDuel. He's been over 22 DraftKings points in 4 of the last 5.
Yep.
And he has a high of 33. And like you mentioned, in these last couple, he hasn't even gotten the win. In 4 of those 5, he hasn't gotten the win. So there's even more upside there when the Cubs actually put some runs on the board behind him. He's not walking anybody. He only has 1 game with more than 1 walk on the season. I mean, he's just the innings pitched give you a really solid floor. He's probably that mid-range cash game option for me today. And I don't really mind him in GPPs either. We've seen him put up a 30-plus game on DraftKings. Kansas City has been hitting pretty well.
Miami?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Miami's been hitting pretty well since Yelich got back in the lineup.
Sure.
But like you said, they have been crushing lefties without him in the lineup a little bit more. I mean, crushing is relative against what they've been doing against righties. But, I mean, Stanton's been struggling a little bit lately. He hasn't been quite as good as he was early in the season. And even with Yelich back, they just haven't been very good against righties.
Yeah. So I think that he makes for one of my favorite plays that I don't think a lot of people will be on, and especially that DraftKings price is $7,800.
Yeah,
you really got to like that. And they said that he is dealing with a fingernail issue, but I think that he's going to be fine. So I guess monitor that just in case, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue for tonight. And I'm going to be playing him quite a bit tonight across some GPPs and things like that. Maybe it's a secondary cash game option, like you said. But like you said, I mean, he doesn't walk anyone, so he doesn't throw a lot of pitches. So he has that ability to pitch deep, which a lot of these guys on tonight's slate outside the elite arms really don't have. So I'm going to be looking that way. And next up, Jordan Zimmermann, $8,900 on FanDuel and $8,600 on DraftKings. He's facing Toronto. It's in Washington, and posed by R.A. Dickey, who we know we never know what to expect. It's either dancing or it's not dancing. It's good or bad. Jordan Zimmermann minus 151 favorite and a 7.5 run total. Said there's a 70% chance of showers and storms in this one, so keep your eye on that just in case, because are some weather concerns here. I'm not a guy who plays Jordan Zimmermann. I don't think he's terrible. I don't think he's great. He's just a guy that's okay enough and just expensive enough that he just never makes my roster. So I don't think that he's a bad play, but I don't think he's a particularly great play because he just is what he is. He's just slightly above average, and at his price tag, he's unplayable for me.
Yeah, definitely. A decent amount of weather concerns in that game today also makes it a little bit tough. He's a guy that I've been careful with a lot, so not a guy that I want to really run out there when there's a chance of rain. I mean, Toronto's got a ton of power. Like you said, he's just a little bit too pricey and lacks a little bit of the upside for him to really fit into any of my lineups today at this price. I think eventually he's going to get below 8K, and he's going to be a guy that we can use in a lot of different stuff. But at 8,600 right now, I mean, there's so many better guys at just above 9,000 and stuff like that I'm going to go that route more often.
I agree with you there. Andrew Cashner is next up. He's a minus 115 favorite. We already mentioned opposing Jacob deGrom. 6.5 run total in Petco. You obviously love those factors there. And now he gets a Mets offense who, as we know, awful against righties. They've actually dropped below the Angels. As fighting now with the Phillies for the worst in the league. 285 team WOBA, 115 ISO, striking out just under 20% of the time. This is just a bad offense. And pitcher's park, so obviously you don't like that. But Cashner, he hasn't really had any of those great games. He had a 10 strikeout game against Houston, but that seems to be the theme. Seems like everyone's had a 10 strikeout game against Houston. But hasn't really shown the upside that he had 2 seasons ago where he was striking out 8, 9, 10 batters all the time. I mean, it seems like his last 5 games, either 3 or 6 in every game. So, I mean, he's a fine play. He's $8,300 on FanDuel, and on DraftKings, he's $8,000. I think he's an okay play, but I think you and I are of the same thinking that you prefer deGrom here. He's got the bigger upside. And, I mean, it is kind of close to a pick-em, but I don't have a whole lot of faith in the San Diego offense to help him out against deGrom either. So I think this is just going to be one of those ones where it's low scoring. So maybe it's a secondary cash option, but I don't think I'm paying his price in GP.
Yeah, especially with San Diego's offense a little banged up right now. I mean, they were already playing an outfielder short. Now I think they're 2 short, right, of their starters. I mean, what a big surprise. Another guy with 10 strikeouts against Houston for his best strikeout game of the year. One thing I will say about Cashner is he was much better at home last year, and both of the games he started at home this year, he scored at least, I want to say, 20 fantasy points. So, I mean, he's a little bit better at home. He's obviously that slight favorite and what's really more of a pick-em than anything. I don't mind him in GPPs because he is a little bit cheaper than Zimmermann and guys like that, where I think he'll be underowned in a decent GPP play. I don't want to trust him in cash games. I like to fall back on the win in cash games more than anything. And it just doesn't feel like a very safe win. And like you said, I prefer DeGrom in this one, even though it is a pick-up with him slightly dogged.
100% agree with you there. And here's a guy you might be able to consider in both formats. Clay Buchholz, $7,900 on FanDuel. DraftKings, once again, gives us a nice price for him at only $7,000. Facing off against the Twins today, and he's a minus 180 favorite in 8-run total. Mike Pelfrey on the other side. You assume he's going to get plenty of run support here, of course. And you look at the Twins, 22.1% strikeout rate against righties, 295 team WOBA. We know what they do against left-handed pitching, but I'm not going to say it's the opposite against righties, but they're not nearly as good against righties as they are against lefties as a team. And Buchholz has shown some big-time upside. I mean, he's got 24.1% strikeout rate this year, ground ball rate of almost 50%, walk rate of 6.2. So he's one of those guys who, he's been pitching really well, but yet another guy who's been flying under the radar, probably because he seems to be every 5 games with guys like Clayton Kershaw and Felix Hernandez on the same day, so no one ever looks at him. But he's got a couple double-digit strikeout games. His last game at Minnesota, he went 7 1/3, 7 hits, 4 Ks, gave up a couple earned runs. So he was okay there, but as we know, Minnesota, a much better team at home than they are on the road as well. So I think that Buchholz makes for a nice cheap swerve option tonight if you're just trying to get yourself exposure to an offense that's not very good.
Yeah, definitely. I like him quite a bit tonight, actually, especially where he's priced at. There's just not a lot of guys in his range that I feel very good about on this slate. I mean, obviously we like all the guys above him that we've talked about quite a bit, but that's a pretty solid discount for a guy that's favored pretty heavily here, facing a Minnesota team, like you mentioned, that hasn't been great against righties. They've just absolutely crushed lefties this year, and it's made their offense look better in general on paper because, they are actually crushing lefties, and it's really improving their overall numbers where they haven't been great against righties. They have a lot of guys that hit lefties really well, like Pluth and Dozier and stuff like that. So I think he's a really sneaky play today that's going to be a really solid option.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you there. I'll have him probably more in GPPs than anybody, like you said, near that range, 100%. Next guy, not really on my radar, but I want to get your take on him. Mike Fiers, he's $8,500 on DraftKings, which is way too high if you ask me. $7,500 on FanDuel. I don't like targeting St. Louis with very many pitchers. They're not quite the Royals for me, but it's just one of those things I don't like targeting. And Fiers, if he's not getting strikeouts, really doesn't have much upside. He's not that great of a pitcher if you ask me. 26.8% strikeout rate in the season you like. You don't like the 37% ground ball rate or his 1.22 home runs per 9 because obviously that's been his big struggle throughout his career. But, his last couple games, he had that stretch where he had 12 Ks against Chicago, 8 against the Dodgers, 7 against the White Sox. But his last 3, 5, and 6. If this guy's not striking out a lot of batters, he doesn't have any value to me because he hasn't pitched more than 6 innings, 6 1/3 in a single game this year. So completely off my radar today. No thanks.
Yeah, definitely. There's one other guy I had on here that I was looking at.
I got to guess.
Do you?
Is it Ryan Vogelsong?
Yes, it is.
I knew it.
I was looking for his price there. $6,100 on DraftKings. Vogelsong's been incredible again.
I know. I don't want to believe in it, but, he's been good.
I know. He's been just so good. What is it? 4 out of the last 5 games with 20-plus DraftKings points. He's going 6-7 innings most of these, racking up about 5 strikeouts a game right now. He's just looked really good. His big thing is he's not getting really deep into games. I think 7 innings is as far as he's gone. But, he's just been rock solid, and his price is the big thing. He's up to $6,100 now on DraftKings, a little bit higher than that on FanDuel, I believe.
66, yeah.
Yeah, 66 on FanDuel. There's just not a lot of pitchers you can pitch that have been as solid as him at that price range. You usually see guys that are way up and down in that price range, and he's just been kind of chugging along, putting up 20 DraftKings points, about 10 FanDuel points here. He's pretty solid. At San Francisco is a decent pitcher's park. Pittsburgh's offense hasn't been particularly good, especially against righties. He's a slight underdog today, but even that one's a little bit more like a pick'em than anything else. So I think he's a decent GPP option as like a really cheap guy. I've been throwing him out there pretty much every time he pitches lately.
Yeah, and at that price, like you said, even if he doesn't get the win, he might be fine. And San Francisco offense is really starting to hit the ball. They've been one of the better teams against righties over the past month or so. So they're really starting to get it going. Maybe get some run support. But even if he doesn't, like you said, if he goes 6-7 innings, gets you 5 Ks, gives up maybe 2 earned runs, that's way more than enough as a secondary pitcher there for 6.6K or 6.1 on DraftKings.
Yeah, and like you said, their offense has really come around. I mean, Belt went from doing absolutely nothing for April to having a pretty huge May. Brandon Crawford's been on fire up until the last couple of games or so here. He cooled off a little bit, but it looks like he's been doing really well. He's another lefty that's hitting righties pretty solidly. I mean, their whole offense has been much better over the last 3 weeks or so.
Absolutely. Next up, this is purely a matchup play. As we talked about, everyone getting 10 strikeouts against the Astros. I'm certainly not seeing 10 strikeouts here from Ubaldo Jimenez, especially with his very low swinging strike rate on this season. One of the lowest in the league, actually. But he did face his team last time out, went 7 innings, gave up 10 hits, 5 Ks, which is okay. But what you're really looking for here is a strikeout upside, like we said. And this is a team that when they're not swinging the bats well, I mean, they miss a lot of bats, or they miss a lot. And Ubaldo Jimenez does not miss a lot of bats, so something's got to give here. He's either going to get rocked or luck himself into some strikeouts with some of these not very patient hitters at the plate. And he's $7,100 on FanDuel, which is an okay price, and $64 on FanDuel or DraftKings. So I think he's in play for tournaments. Not a guy that I'm actively targeting. I definitely much prefer Ryan Vogelsong here, but I think if you have to have someone at that price, I don't mind slotting him in as an SP2 and a GPP, but he won't be a pitcher on FanDuel at all.
No, that's tough. I mean, he hasn't looked good in the last couple starts against some pretty weak teams, but he has had a couple good starts this year, so I think he's a pretty good GPP play, especially against the Astros, who are striking out a ton, like you mentioned. That's where I'm going to be looking at him at.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a 25.2% strikeout rate against righties, but they also have a 183 ISO, which is second best in the league behind the Dodgers. So, like we said, something's got to give here. He's either going to give up a lot of long balls or just get fortunate, but probably not a way that I'm really going to be looking at. And with a couple more minutes here, we'll look at one more guy here. And this guy, I think you're probably of the same thinking as me. I think he's going to get rocked. Alex Wood, $7,700 on FanDuel. And on DraftKings, he's $8,200. Way overpriced. And in fact, I think that both sides of this, actually, Arizona and Atlanta, I think are pretty good stacks for today. I don't have any faith in Alex Wood. We've seen it in years past where he had those games. You know, he had some 12 strikeout games, some big-time upside, but really hasn't shown that this year. He had a couple good games against Washington, but it seems to me that Washington's the only team he can really dominate. And he was good against the Dodgers last time out, don't get me wrong, but I don't have any faith in this guy, and I feel like it's always his biggest games are against the Nationals, and I'm not buying into the recent success. This is a Diamondbacks team that crushes left-handed pitching, one of the better teams in the league here. If you look at them, 10th in the league. They've got a team 130 ISO, which isn't great, but 328 WOBA. They walk almost 10% of the time. Control's been a big issue with him throughout his career, so not a guy I'm targeting as my pitcher, but I'm definitely targeting with some hitters.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a pretty strong play also.
All right, with that, that's going to wrap things up for us. Subscribe to this YouTube channel here and find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Check out all of our great content for tonight's slate, every other slate at dailyfantasycafe.com.